Hi QA folks, today let's talk about risk-based testing strategy. I see this phrase risk-based testing in almost each and every job listing on LinkedIn, so let's take a look. First of all, this testing strategy goes down to one main question: what needs to be tested first? It's an organizational approach used to prioritize the test based on the risk of failure in some specific areas and the importance or priority of the tests that is covered in those areas. It can be applied to all stages or during all stages: test planning, test design, test implementation, test execution. This includes ranking of tests in terms of priority. High priority test cases should be written first and executed first. So basically, you can have high, medium, and low values in terms of priorities. Risk-based testing mainly concentrates on two factors: likelihood and impact. So likelihood means how likely the risk to happen, while impact measures how serious the consequences could be if the risk actually occurs. In terms of test cases, usually there might be two different fields in your test case management system: priority and severity. So severity is impact, priority is priority. Instead of using complicated math, these techniques rely on simple judgments. For instance, a team may rate the chance of risk as high, medium, or low, as I said, and its impacts as severe, moderate, or minor. These ratings help you to prioritize your tests and testing efforts where those should be focused. For example, account creation and sign-in should be tested earlier before everything else, because if this part doesn't work, users will not be able to use your application at all, right? So the same goes for placing an order and payments. Those should be tested as high priority features in the first place, because if payments do not work, who cares if, for example, profile info update works or not, right? So this should be used as a judgments what to test first. For cross-platform or cross-browser testing, the same approach: test in the first place in those browsers or platforms that are used most by your customers, if you have the statistics. So basically, you can ask your project manager or product owner if they can provide you with this kind of information. And nowadays everyone is using Agile as a development methodology, so usually it's 2-week sprints, and all this risk-based testing comes from the fact that 2-week time frame usually is not enough to test every or most of the features of modern website and apps. So basically you have no choice but to prioritize what needs to be tested and to what extent within those 2 weeks. So what are my real advices or suggestions how to apply this strategy on practice? First of all, risk identification should be done by brainstorming with the whole team, with your team. Everyone should participate: developers, DevOps, product owners, customer support, everyone. Because if the whole team is not interested in implementing this approach for development and testing, you cannot do it by yourself. As a test engineer, most likely you will not have an understanding which can impact what are the risks in different areas. For this, you should gain some insights from developers, from DevOps. You should be aware about infrastructure, what are reliable parts of infrastructure that your application will be deployed in, what are not reliable. So that's why the whole team should be interested in this approach, and everyone should give their insights and ideas, share their ideas. Next, test software by focusing on the areas where problems are most likely to happen. For example, all kind of integrations with third-party software services or vendors, meaning that, for example, for payments, right? If you usually will not be creating, your development team will not be likely creating payments infrastructure implementation from scratch. You will be integrated with some third-party payment services providers, and there are pretty much high risk with those that they can change something on their side, and something will be broken on your side because of their changes. So those are areas, all those kinds of integrations are always risky, so it's better to test them first and more thoroughly. Next, new test case management system, TestRail, TestLink, Jira X-Ray, Zephyr, whatever you are using. You can fill in the field priority for each test case. I wouldn't suggest you to use few fields like priority and severities. It will become messy for you and hard to manage. So usually using one field, just one field for everything is more than enough priority. Then when creating test execution and executing the tests themselves, you can filter your test sets or test suites by this field and execute all high priority tests first, then medium, then low, depending on how much time you will have for your testing. So that's the idea and how to apply it on practice. Next, for QA team members, you can review each other's test cases to make sure nothing is missing from important test cases or some edge cases. It's really good practice. I don't see it applied often, but it's really useful exercise to have within the team to review each other's test cases. But of course, it takes time to do that. So that's why most of the teams are skipping this exercise. Next one, rollback plan should be in place in case something goes wrong during the deployment, and if you will need to roll back to some previous build version. In practice, on all of my projects, only in one or two of them this part was implemented, and it was really handy because there is always something goes wrong during the deployment, and if developers develop their code and prepare and release in the way that there is no way to roll back to previous version, then most likely bad things will happen in production, and there will be downtime in your production services. Next one, suggest to dev team to have feature flags implemented in code or config level, on the config level, to have an ability to enable disabled features separately without redeploying the whole app stack. This one again can be only a suggestion because it should be from your side, I mean from QA perspective, because it should go as a separate task from product owner to developers to implement this kind of mechanism. Again, going back to my point that the whole team should be interested in implementing this process. The same for the next one. You can only suggest or advise to the dev team and to the team, to the whole team itself, to implement some kind of audit or analytics tracking system in place to gather statistics on what are the most frequent features used by your real customers. Some companies have it, some don't, but it can give you again insights on what to test in the first place, what are the most used features within your app. For example, you might be surprised that nobody will ever go to profile and update his email or something, so it will be low priority feature for you to test. So there are some really useful and surprising things that you can find out if you have this kind of statistics. But again, it should be tracked. There should be mechanism in place to track this kind of interactions with your software, with your application, with your website. And the last thing probably you can do, or I advise you to do, is to ask developers to advise what areas can be affected by each code change, especially during code freeze, and focus on those areas more during your regression testing rounds. Don't be surprised if developers will not be willing to share this info or do not want to spend time on this. So, but you can ask from your side. You can only ask for advices. If they don't want to give it, then that's fine. You will do whatever you can from your side, from QA perspective. And also, not everyone taking into account or consider different kind of other kind of risks, like sometimes team members might get sick. You will be lacking of resources for testing, for development. It will shift your schedule, make the deadline even tighter. The same goes for things like test environment downtime. Sometimes someone will break test environment with their build. It will be, in my practice, sometimes like test environment was done for up to 4 hours during the work week. So those things better to consider during test planning as well, and to just embed this kind of time for these things that they might happen.